12 miles off Scarborough Shoal, the calm sea erupted into chaos. The Philippine Coast Guard ship BRP Suluan was running escort, shielding two small relief boats stacked with food and fuel. But on her tail, a Chinese Coast Guard cutter surged forward, water cannons lashing like whips across her deck. Each blast hit with the force of a hammer, threatening to shatter glass and sweep crew overboard. The chase was already dangerous, and then it got worse. From the port side, a silhouette cut through the spray, a Chinese Navy destroyer, massive, bristling with missiles, moving at speed. Suddenly, two ships from the same flag were converging on the same target. In seconds, the cutter's intercept path crossed directly into the destroyer's track. The result? Steel smashing into steel, crews thrown off their feet, and a collision Beijing never wanted exposed. What followed was confusion, silence, and the kind of international embarrassment that can shift the balance in the South China Sea. The clock read 12:04 UTC on August 11, 2025, when the chase turned deadly. The Philippine cutter BRP Suluan had been holding steady, careful not to provoke, careful not to break formation. But the Chinese Coast Guard ship, hull number 3104, wasn't there to play safe. Its skipper swung wide to the port side, a textbook move to cut across the Suluan's bow and force it off course. At 20 knots, the margin for error is razor thin. Spray exploded from the bow as engines roared, water cannons still hammering. Then, through the chaos, a shadow grew larger, the silhouette of the PLA Navy destroyer, hull number 164. It wasn't slowing, it wasn't turning. The cutter's intercept angle wasn't just crossing the Philippine ship's path, it was cutting directly into the destroyer's track. Seconds ticked away, no radio calls answered, no alarms raised. And then it happened. The cutter slammed forward, smashing bow first into the destroyer's port side. Steel crumpled, horns blared, and silence fell across the water. For the Philippine crew, the sound was unmistakable, a deep metallic boom that rolled across the waves like thunder. Through binoculars, they watched the cutter's bow buckle inward, steel folding like paper under a fist. Men who had been standing at the rails vanished from sight, tossed back by the violent halt. On the destroyer, paint ripped away in jagged streaks, gouges running along her port side. She was scarred, but still seaworthy. The cutter, however, was finished. Engines cut, bow submerged, dead in the water. Sirens wailed across the sea, but radio silence followed. The Suluan's officers called out over open channels, offering medical aid and rescue teams. The response? Nothing, not even an acknowledgement. On deck, the Philippine sailors braced for the worst, a counterstrike, an escalation, something. But instead, the destroyer slowed, backing off, its crew scrambling to inspect damage while the crippled cutter listed helplessly in the swell. What had begun as an intimidation run had ended in China's own ships colliding under foreign eyes.
On the deck of the BRP Suluan, disbelief spread faster than the sea spray. Minutes earlier, the crew had been crouched behind shields, bracing for another punishing wave from the Chinese cutter's water cannon. Now, their enemy had collided with its own ally. Officers raised binoculars, scanning the cutter's twisted bow. Crewmen who had been stationed forward were gone from sight. Whether injured, thrown back, or worse, no one knew. The radio operator repeated calls in English and Mandarin. Chinese vessel, we can provide medical assistance. We can assist with search and rescue. 3 times the offer went out. 3 times silence answered. The destroyer's crew seemed more concerned with scraping paint off their hull than acknowledging the chaos beside them. To the Suluan's sailors, the message was clear. Pride mattered more than help. Manila would later call it reckless and atrocious. But for the men standing on the Suluan's deck, it was something else. A surreal moment when the hunter turned on itself, and intimidation collapsed into humiliation. Scarborough Shoal looks from above like nothing more than a turquoise ring of reefs and shallow waters. But beneath its calm surface lies one of the most contested flashpoints in the world. Just 124 nautical miles off Luzon, it sits inside the Philippines' exclusive economic zone under international law. Yet since 2012, Chinese ships have occupied and controlled it, rotating between Coast Guard cutters, militia boats, and, when the stakes rise, full-blown warships. For Manila, every mission here, even escorting food and fuel, is a statement of defiance, a reminder that these seas are not forgotten. For Beijing, every interception is about control, presence, and face. On August 11th, that balance cracked. The cutter's failed interception and collision with its own destroyer revealed just how dangerous this gray zone warfare has become. At sea, mistakes happen fast. And in waters this contested, a single wrong move doesn't just risk ships, it risks a chain reaction, one that could pull the entire region into crisis. Within hours of the collision, Manila made its position clear. Commodore J. Tariella of the Philippine Coast Guard condemned the Chinese cutter's maneuver as reckless and inane, a direct violation of coal regs, the international rules meant to prevent collisions at sea. He emphasized that the Suluan's crew had offered assistance immediately, and that China's refusal spoke volumes. We offered medical help, search and rescue. They refused. That says a lot. In Beijing, the response was strikingly different. A spokesman acknowledged a maritime encounter, but made no mention of a crash. Instead, he described it as lawful enforcement within Chinese waters. No photos of the damaged cutter were released. State media went silent. To one side, it was proof of dangerous overconfidence. To the other, it was business as usual. But silence after a disaster can be as revealing as any statement. In the South China Sea, it isn't just ships that collide. Narratives do too. And neither side can afford to back down without losing face.
The August 11th collision was not the first confrontation, and it will not be the last. For years, the South China Sea has been a laboratory for gray zone tactics, pressure without open war. Chinese cutters have aimed lasers to blind Philippine sailors, blocked resupply missions to outposts in the Spratlys, and rammed fishing boats in the dark of night. Each time, Beijing frames the actions as law enforcement, not aggression. Water cannons instead of gunfire, ramming instead of missiles. The goal is always the same: show dominance without firing the first shot. But this time, the danger turned inward. In the rush to intimidate, China's own vessels collided. For analysts, the message is chilling. If two ships under the same flag can crash in broad daylight under the eyes of foreign patrols, what happens when rival warships cut too close? At sea, escalation is measured in seconds, and one wrong move is enough to turn a standoff into a battlefield. Scarborough Shoal may be a ring of reefs, but the waters around it carry the weight of the global economy. Over 60% of the world's maritime trade, an estimated $3.4 trillion worth of oil, containers, and bulk cargo, flows through the South China Sea each year. A single spark here could ripple into supply chains from Tokyo to New York. And the military stakes are just as high. China has spent years transforming reefs into fortified outposts, runways, radar towers, missile batteries, a web of steel and concrete that stretches across the Spratlys and Paracels. From these positions, the PLA Navy can monitor, and if it chooses, control, vast stretches of this vital waterway. Scarborough lies close enough to extend that reach toward the Philippine mainland. That's why every interception, every blockade, every collision matters. This isn't just about fishermen or patrol boats. It's about who controls the sea lanes that power the modern world, and how far they're willing to prove it.
On the bridge of the BRP Suluan, the crew stood in stunned silence. They had trained for harassment, for water cannons and shadowing, but not for this. A Chinese cutter crippled against its own destroyer. Some sailors whispered that they had just witnessed history. Others kept their eyes locked on the sea, waiting for retaliation that never came. For the Chinese crew, the shock was sharper. Men had been visible on the cutter's forward deck moments before the crash. After impact, they were gone, thrown backward or below deck, their condition unknown. Pride demanded silence, but the faces told another story: confusion, fear, even humiliation. At sea, moments like this burn into memory. Years later, sailors will still recall the sound of steel on steel, the sudden stillness after chaos. These waters are described in terms of fleets and trade, but they are also lived in the sweat, fear, and discipline of crews who carry out orders. And for those men, August 11th will never fade. In the days that followed, the silence was almost louder than the crash itself. No hotline calls between navies, no joint investigation, no images released by Chinese state media. For Beijing, admitting the collision would mean admitting a mistake. For Manila, broadcasting it meant proof of China's recklessness. The absence of dialogue spoke volumes. In the South China Sea, power is measured not only by ships on the water, but by which story survives the news cycle. The Philippines framed the event as a reckless violation that risked lives. China framed it as routine enforcement, as if nothing unusual had happened. But beneath the competing words, the reality lingered. 2 Chinese vessels had collided in full view of foreign eyes. It was a reminder that intimidation is a dangerous game, and even the most disciplined fleets are vulnerable to miscalculation. And in contested waters, a single misstep does not stay local. It echoes across the world stage. The South China Sea has seen countless close calls. Jets buzzing cockpits, fishing boats rammed in the dark, patrols locked in standoffs. But rarely does the danger turn inward. August 11th, 2025 was one of those rare moments when intimidation backfired and Chinese steel tore into Chinese steel. For Manila, it was validation of their warnings. For Beijing, it was a story buried under silence. But for the rest of the world, it was something else, a warning of how fragile this balance really is. Scarborough Shoal may look like a ring of sand and sea, but it's a chess piece on a global board. A place where one mistake can spark a crisis far beyond its reefs. So here's the question. Was this just a reckless accident born of overconfidence? Or was this the most visible proof yet that the game being played in these waters is spiraling out of control?